Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys for another episode of the Canton and Symeou show. Joining me as per is Harry Symeou. How you doing, mate? You good?
Yeah, all good, man. How are you? Good to
Very
be
good.
back.
Joining us this time, not from a corridor, not from a fancy kitchen. This time it's a fancy studio. This time it's nice.
Yeah, it's not real.
The wonders of a green screen.
I know, it's brilliant, isn't it? Brilliant.
Very good indeed. How you doing, mate? You all right?
Yeah, all good, man. All good. It's not been the greatest last couple of days, sort of dealing with the fallout of an Arsenal defeat. As you know, it's always a bit depressing, and in our job, you can't really escape it because it's a part of everything that you do. So, yeah, not been the greatest couple of days, but obviously the good thing about Premier League football is that the next game is normally not very far away. So there's an opportunity to put that right and lift the mood among the fans.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think that since getting into kind of full-time working around Arsenal, it's like the losses hurt even more because it affects your life so much more than it did before. Like, originally just teaching, you go into work on Monday, wouldn't have to worry about that. You just go and teach and that's it. And then the next time you talk about it's either on the channel or social media or whatever. But yeah, now it is think up your ideas for what you're going to write about for the week about Arsenal. So it can be a really painful experience. Speaking of which, we've got quite an important topic to discuss today. But firstly, of course, if you do enjoy listening to mine and Harry's conversations, you can check out the alternative episodes on Harry's Chronicles of a Gooner channel. The link to that is always in the description, so make sure you do go and check that out. And next week's show, should we find the time, will of course be over there as we alternate back and forth with these shows on the channel. So make sure if you are subscribed here, you also need to be subscribed over there as well to get all of the content. But yeah, we kick off, Harry. Basically, this show, which was always going to happen anyway, but the topic for this show was spawned from what happened in Lee Judge's show the other day. And I do want to kick off by saying that isn't the responsibility, or it doesn't, what happened and what was going on in the chat isn't because of Lee. It's nothing that Lee's done. It's nothing that Dan's done. It's nothing that Sophie's done that joined us. And actually, if you go and watch that show and ignore, say, the chat box, it is a brilliant, brilliant debate and conversation about where all of our heads were at after that game. And what I'm alluding to, obviously, is in the chat box is the abuse, which I only received, I'd imagine, probably about 5 to 10% of, because, I was still quite critical of Arteta during the show at certain points, whereas, from your perspective, certainly there was a lot more things that you defended, and because of that, the live chat and the subsequent comment section as well was incredibly vitriolic, to the point where there was even some racially motivated comments talking about kind of, where you're from. And I wanted to discuss this because, of course, abuse has come up a lot of times on this channel, and we talk about it on this channel a lot. And I've talked with several of our podcasting guests about kind of abuse and social media and specifically Arsenal. But, I don't know really how to frame the starting question other than saying, like, how were you after the show finished? Because I know I watched your show yesterday, and you said about, you're used to it now and you've got a thick skin and stuff. But, we can all have the thickest skin in the world. It's still not okay that stuff happened.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. You do start to develop a bit of a thick skin about it. And the thing I always sort of say to myself is no idiot hiding behind, and that is what they are. I know some people say, oh, you're sort of, by calling them idiots, you're kind of doing what they are idiots. Okay, that's the bottom line.
Yeah.
The way I always look at it, and the thing I always tell myself when from time to time it does get to you, because it does. The thing I always tell myself is I've worked so hard to forge a career in an industry that I had no experience in, because I wanted to follow a passion and I wanted to follow something like a dream that I wanted to do, that no person who hides behind a avatar and a dodgy screen name is going to take that away from me or put me off doing what I want to do because they don't agree with my opinions or because they choose to go over the line. The other thing I'd say is that it's the nature of social media, unfortunately, because for so many years, this kind of stuff has just gone completely unpoliced. And it's almost, and there's a Mike Tyson quote that I've used about 10 times this week, which is the problem with social media is it gave people the feeling that they could disrespect one another without getting a punch in the face for it. And it's so spot on. Like there's people that I know are in my chat box regularly who, and listen, if they're bad, I block them. But there are some that have crossed that line a few times, I think, who have come up to me at Emirates Stadium and said, "Oh, how you doing, mate? Blah, blah, blah. I watch your channel. Nice to see you. Blah blah blah. By the way, I am so and so." And it's like, well, the energy and the way you've come up to me today is completely different to the way you put yourself across online. And I do genuinely think that some people don't actually recognize that what they're doing is as severe as it is. To me, you know, as you say, I've gotten used to it over the last 2-3 years, and at the beginning it was really hard to deal with, and even now if I'm having a bad day anyway, it can impact. But what you got to do is block it out, and you've got to sort of focus on what's important to you. But at the same time, you can't let it go without speaking about it. You can't let it go without highlighting it, because there are other people who, for whatever reason, might not be in the place on that day at that time where they can let it go over their head, or they can cool down from it and just move on. And as I was saying to you off air, you know, I recently saw a family friend who's got a young son who is, I think he's about 16, 17 years old. And when we was talking, and I said to him sort of like, what are you looking to do with yourself, and what are your kind of hopes and stuff? He said to me that I want to get into football writing, but I'm shit scared of the abuse that I'm going to get online, because I don't know that I'd be able to ignore it, and I don't know that I'd be able to handle it. And that just put into context for me how impactful you can be behind a keyboard from an anonymous account on somebody else's life. You could potentially stop that kid following his dream and what he wants to do and the career path that he wishes to take, because you think it's okay to throw stupid comments out on social media. And I just think, like, you know, we've seen it over the years so many times. How many famous people, Tom, have we heard of who, and we don't, like, I don't get it to the extent that some of those people got it, but how many of them have either taken their own lives off the back of it, or you know, gone into severe depression? People need to take responsibility for the words that they use. We've all gone a little bit over the line now and again, but if you're a regular offender, and you're somebody who has no regard for the impact of your words on other people, then, you know, that something has to change. Like I always say that if I look back at my Twitter a few years ago, I would say that now I operate with a lot more, not caution, but with a lot more respect, because I've been on the other side of it. And I now understand the impact it has. So I think that people in our position who are now in a place where we are on the receiving end of it have even more responsibility, because we've been the person that nobody knows, and then, I'm not saying we're famous, but the person that nobody knows, and then the person that now gets it. I think for us, we're in a position where we're educated a bit more around it, and so we need to make sure that when it does happen and when it does come up, we make a point of highlighting how bad it is and the impact it can have, because you don't know what your words that you think are sort of just, I don't know, you know, just sort of trivial. You don't know what impact those words have on other people. And why does it need to get personal? Like, if you're Arteta in or you're Arteta out, does that make you a good or bad person? No, it doesn't. Does that mean that you deserve to get sort of abuse for it? No, it doesn't. And I mean, you've been there as well. How do you sort of cope with it? Because for me, it is very much now, you're not stopping me doing what I want to do. You're not stopping me achieving what I want to achieve, to sort of get in the bin. And that's the way I get myself through it. But what about yourself? How do you deal with it?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I deal with it well, and I wouldn't say I'm, you know, some kind of exemplar person in regards to dealing with abuse, because I naturally am quite a bitey person, and you know, everyone's got their friend groups, everyone's got their mates that love to wind them up and bait them, and you know, I am one of those people in the WhatsApp group that are very easy to bait, and you know, I will absolutely come back at you on stuff. And I think that's what, for me, from my personality standpoint, makes it very difficult sometimes to deal with this. I have considered, and I've spoken to people that I do podcasts with, so this isn't a surprise in any way that I'm going to be saying this, but I've been considering stopping going on other channels where the abuse is at a high. I mean, regularly, obviously, both myself and you do go on Lee Judge's channel. Every Monday, I do the Arsenal Lounge with Lev, Shaheen, and Mo. And I'm not talking as if like myself and you are the only targets of this. There are lots of people out there that regularly. Sophie gets a lot of abuse in chat boxes, and there was one moment during the show on Sunday where she bit back at one of the comments I think that was thrown in, and annoyingly, obviously, some of those comments are of a sexist nature, which obviously myself and you aren't going to experience. But from her perspective, how she deals with that is to ignore it and move on. And people, and I in particular, used to say, block, move on, forget about it. And I've kind of grown to know that that's not an effective strategy always. It just isn't. Because the way and the nature of which social media is that it's so regenerative that, you can block and move on. But there are thousands of these types of people that feel like it's fine to just abuse and attack and go beyond what is criticism. Because I've got nothing wrong with someone telling me that my opinion's wrong and giving me a list of reasons as to why. There's nothing wrong with that. That's the whole entire reason why we do this, is to create debate. Me and you sat down at the end of the January window and had differing views about the January window and had a discussion about it. But I didn't turn around and say, wow, your footballing knowledge is awful, Harry, like, because you have this point of view. Like, you clearly don't know what you're talking about. Or, I question your sanity. I question your intelligence having that point of view. No, like, it's about a discussion. If you're coming up with reasoned points behind what you're making, then we're going to have a great chat and go back and forth. And who knows, maybe even one of us changes our mind. I know I change my mind about a lot of things when I'm presented with new evidence. And then I think that brings up something else that I've been talking about. I actually put an article up about this morning on Football London, was the idea of this flip-flop thing.
Yeah.
It's a term I hate. So I really dislike it because it's becoming a way in which people are using it to try and discourage people from changing their mind about things. It's a term that's often brought up from both ends of the spectrum, be it in this case Arteta in and Arteta out, is that if, say, I think that people have shoehorned me in particular into an Arteta in category because of, I've defended so many things that he's done. I've praised him for a lot of stuff that he's done. But whenever you see me like I was on Judge's channel or on the lounge on Monday night criticising decisions, people will turn around and be like, you're a flip-flop. Like, you're just changing your mind on it. Like, you're meant to be like this person that defends Arteta, and here you are, changing your mind or criticising. And the fact of the matter is, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, you can criticise.
And you can be critical of a decision or a performance or an idea without thinking that somebody is completely incompetent and useless. And that's the thing. There seems to be no middle ground in anything anymore. You're either big time Arteta in or big time Arteta out. Like, I get it all the time. I get the other side. I got it today on the stream I did earlier today. You're an Arteta loyalist. No, I'm not. I just happen to think that this season he's done a pretty good job overall. Yes, of course, the last week hasn't been great, but I think we've done a good job. And I don't really sort of understand why people, as you say, struggle to come back with points and want to have that debate. I think debate is brilliant because even if it doesn't change your mind, it helps you to see the other side, and it's incredible. So for me, I think it's really important that people, when they do want to throw shade at you, as it was put in the chat, they do it in a way that is constructive and respectful. As you say, I might make a point. Somebody could sit there and put 10 bullet points as to why my point is wrong, and I will read it out. And if it's done respectfully, I will read it out. I will give my counterpoints to it, etc., etc. And that's that. Like, I haven't got a problem with that. But someone pointed it out in the chat as well. We shouldn't have to get used to being abused. Like, we're in a place where we have to get used to it to a degree because we're never going to be able to control the way other people act. But why should that be the case? Why should it be okay? The things that people say on social media, they'd never say it to your face. And I can promise you, and without sounding like I'm trying to be arrogant here, I can promise you that if you did say it to my face, in a lot of cases, you would regret it, because I would like you bite back. I do bite back. And I don't fight for things that I don't care about. So, you know, I only fight for things that I care about. So I care about Arsenal Football Club, and therefore I'm passionate about the opinions I give on Arsenal Football Club. I care about people saying things about my family, which I get quite a bit of. And that bothers me because I care about my family. So my natural inclination when you come at me about things I care about, and my career is also something I really care about, then I will fight back. I'm not like, it's not easy to just sit back and go, ignore it. I've got better at doing that lately, particularly on Twitter. But it isn't always easy to just ignore it and walk away. And if you do, you're kind of taking away the passion and your personality out of the equation. And what do you want to be? A robot that just outputs stuff and has no feeling? It's a really hard balance to find, isn't it?
It's really, really difficult to find it. I mean, I'm quite fortunate. Got my other half is really good at kind of, you know, distracting me from this and talking me through certain things. And obviously, you've got, you know, your family and your amazing kids as well to take your mind away from this stuff when it matters. But yeah, it's a frustration, and I mean, I was looking through the chat box there while you were talking as well, and thank you for all the kind comments that you're throwing in. It really is appreciated, and it is such a human reaction to focus on the negatives when, you know, we're under no illusions that we both get amazing feedback and amazing
100%.
comments all the time, and we don't ignore them. And us having this discussion, I mean, it'd be great if we could sit down and have the thumbnail Tom and Harry discuss the amazing praise towards their channels, which would be a little bit narcissistic, but at the same time we don't ignore them. We aren't just focusing on the negatives, but it is important that you discuss them and then we talk about it. And I do want to take in some of these points. Lewis says, in some ways you guys have a dream job, but I'm under no illusions the abuse that you get despite being measured, I couldn't do it. You're both so excellent. Loved you both on Judges the other day. You were great. Thanks, Lewis. Appreciate that.
Thank you, mate.
Away says, Harry, do you have any regrets of opening a YouTube channel?
Not at all. I can't have any regret because the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast for me has been the sort of the base for everything I've gone to do outside of that. It was an opportunity to kind of get out there, practice more than anything in broadcasting, because, you know, broadcasting is tough, man. And now I do a lot of radio, I do a lot of different things, and I don't think that without the YouTube channel I'd be like, obviously when I talk on YouTube I'm a bit different because you need to be more polished when you're doing sort of a radio broadcast or a commentary or whatever, but doing things live in particular has really, really helped me. So I don't regret it. There are days when I think, oh, is this worth the headache? Is this worth the bother? But when you get those positive comments, as you say, and it's not just about getting positive comments, but when you can do something you're really proud of, then that goes a long way. And it helps kind of motivate you. It helps you want to push forward. So I wouldn't have had any of the opportunities that I've had if I didn't have the YouTube channel, which is obviously part of the overall podcast. So no, I don't regret it. But I can see why. I think it's important that you take time away from it as well. And you'll know this, Tom, because I think you can become obsessed with it. Like you can become obsessed with, like, you put out a show and like every half an hour you want to check how many views it's done, or you want to read through the comments. And I think it's important that you put your work out there into the sort of atmosphere and you just let it go, and you don't get too caught up in it, I think.
Yeah. I think that from a personal perspective, obviously when I started podcasting, it was only as a hobby, and I was, appearing on ABW on a Burkout Wonderland first, and then joined Craig on here, and eventually, obviously, when Craig wanted to move on, took over everything that happened back in 2016 and took this in a very different direction. The way in which Craig saw the podcast and I saw the channel, rather, not podcast. Get so used to saying those words. But yeah, like the way in which Craig did it was not me, and I wasn't ever going to try and copy what Craig did. I wasn't going to try and, be Craig too. It's just not, we're not the same person. And I think obviously taking a channel forward that had some quite heavy hitting opinions, and a lot of people that you find on AFTV, for instance, the start of AFTV's rise as well, trying to take the channel forwards is always going to be tough, and the response to kind of the way in which I took it forward was always going to be resistant at first. But I think the way in which both of our channels have grown is you see a sense of community about the chat boxes on the whole. And it is only really when you go over to other channels, where you're not in control of the chat box, you're not in control of that community, and that isn't going to happen. Like, you don't walk into a different house and expect to control things when you go there. It's just the way that it is, and you're never going to enjoy everyone that you see or that you hear talking about you. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that it's okay that those comments still exist, and maybe more responsibility should be taken. Lewis says, guys, how would you feel if you did a show with some of these abusers? Harry, you mentioned a different energy face to face, but could you do it in a podcast form and challenge them? Just before I get your response to that, Harry, like, from my perspective, the amount of times I've offered, done a phone in, sent a link out, replied to a comment saying, let's talk about this face to face, come on the channel, it never happens, because that's the nature of trolls and people in chat boxes, that they are very happy to sit behind a keyboard and write their drivel, but face to face or on camera or in person, it just doesn't happen.
Yeah, 100%. Most of these people, they don't want to do it because they know that you're gonna put them in their place. They know that having to go deeper than just abusing you and having to actually discuss in depth properly the issue at hand, the issue that you're discussing, or the issue that you're getting abuse for having an opinion on, all that's going to happen is they're just going to get made to look a little bit silly, because in a lot of these cases they don't have the ability to debate you. That's why they resort to that. So yeah, like, in the past I've done the same as Tom. I've said to people, come on the channel, then let's talk about it. I've said to people in anger on Twitter, here's my block number, here's my seat number, come and find me, and say that to my face, because I have lost my rag at times, but nobody ever comes because they don't want to, because they don't they don't want to take it that far. The whole point of doing it anonymously and behind a sort of Twitter handle or behind a YouTube screen name is because it's easy, and they know that they wash their hands of any potential consequences. So you can try that, but I just don't think it works. I just don't think that the majority of those people are willing to then be serious and come on and do it. So yeah, it's just one of those things. But as I say, Tom, like, there's no reason we should accept it. Like, there's none. And this is not just for us, this is for everyone. Like, there are so many people out there who get abused and it impacts them online. Like, why do we do that to people? I just don't get it. And there's also this other thing in our culture nowadays where I find that when somebody makes a mistake, which I've done in the past, when that mistake is highlighted, which it will be at some point, most things are, the willingness of everybody to jump on you and sort of kick you while you're down. And I look at things very differently now. Like, I had an issue, as you saw, where some old tweets of mine were dug up, where I used terms that I would never use now. And when I was 17, 18 years old, I wasn't in the media. I had no regard for what I was saying then, because I had 3 followers who were my 2 mates and my brother. So I didn't really care. But what I saw then was a load of people jumping on the bandwagon to try and kick me while I was down. People who were not offended by what I said, because they couldn't have possibly been offended by what I said, but decided that it would be funny and sort of the cool thing to do, to jump on it. And I've since seen a couple of people that I work with have similar issues, maybe not to the same extent. And I've been very quick now. It's changed my mind. It's changed my mindset on this. And I've been the first one to call them up and say, look, don't worry about it, mate. Ride it out. It will pass. And I won't be jumping on the bandwagon of digging someone out, because you make a mistake, it's bad enough. Like, yourself that you've made a mistake. The last thing you need is a 1,000 randomers sort of trying to make it worse and trying to kick you while you're down. So it's made me think twice about how I would now react to somebody else making a mistake as well. And these are all things you learn along the way, right?
Yeah, and I think that it's also important that people don't perceive this as kind of a conversation where you suddenly think you're on some higher plane, that you've
No,
never said
yeah,
anything bad in your life, that you've never tweeted anything that you regret, or that when you were younger you said certain things that you would certainly not say now. Especially, you know, in the years that we've grown up, and in the age bracket that we are, we grew up in the years of social media, and we grew up in the years where conversations you had 20 years ago are not the same conversations now. I'm not a fan of cancel culture in any single way. I'm a fan of second chances and people learning from their mistakes. And, you know, I think if you're ever going to talk about abuse and stuff like that, you've probably been someone that, you know, have said something that you've regretted in the
yeah,
past, because you understand that it's wrong. If you don't, if you by understanding it's wrong, it's because you've learned that it's wrong from something you've done.
yeah.
So
And I would always say that if somebody has done this in the past, if somebody has abused someone, or spoken in a way that they shouldn't, then as long as they learn from it, you won't catch me going back and saying, "Oh, you did this on X date in 2000." Like, no, that's to reject the idea that people can get better is to reject the whole concept of education. In which case, why are we banging on about it now? And why do we bang on about education around so many issues like racism, like, you know, sexism, all of those things? If you're going to sit here and get on your high horse and say that nobody has made a mistake in the past, and anyone who has made a mistake in the past can't get better, can't change, can't improve, then the whole idea and the whole essence of education is an invalid one. And I don't believe that to be the case. So I'm not saying that if somebody comes and abuses me and then realizes that they crossed the line and learns from it, that I'm going to hold it against them forever. Like that no. But but you've still got to recognize the impact of your actions, whether you've improved on it or learned from it or not. You still have to in a lot of instances, you have to recognize the impact something's had for you to learn from it. And if that's what it takes, then keep abusing me as long as you learn from it. No worries.
I think as well, it's important to talk about kind of this sense of if you ever said anything in the past that was, like, you know, wrong, and that we've learned from it in the future, that when you block someone, you know, a block isn't, there's a difference between blocking something and deleting a person. If you delete a person, you know, in my opinion, that's your cancel culture, whatever. But if you're unaware of how YouTube works, when you block someone, you know, you get a whole list of all the accounts that have been blocked, and you can unblock people within a second. And I think what you said there, Harry, is if, say, someone's been blocked and then they realise what they've done, you know, both our DMs, I think, are open, or were in certain cases, and have maybe reopened now. But I think, yeah, like, if you approach us and say, look, I hold my hands up, what I said was wrong and you were right to block me in that moment, or to be fair, you can come to me and say, I think it was harsh to block me, but I will hold my hands up and say fair enough. If you know, if I can't come and swear and say this X player is whatever, that's fine, but unblock me, I'd have no issue with that. And I have unblocked several people that have, you know, have come to me and said, you know, I hold my hands up, and I know I apologize for the things we put in the chat box. So it's always about being open to just holding your hands up, as we have done on Arsenal topics so many times. I love this from Tony, who says, my whole life has been a mistake. You've had a lot of lessons to learn, Tony. That's all I can say. You must be a great person now.
As long as you learn from them, they're not a waste. That's how you got to see it, mate.
Absolutely.
That's how you got to see it.
Theo says, I'm a YouTuber myself. It is bad that some people can abuse someone. I face trolls online myself, but still crack on. I may not be a star, but I do this as a hobby and I enjoy it. And I think that that's what gets to us, I suppose, is because this is probably the main block, besides Arsenal's form, that stops us from enjoying doing what we do. And that's probably why we care about it so much.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if this wasn't something I did every day and I did it once a month, I probably wouldn't care so much. But it's something that you can never sort of move on from, or you can never put to the back of your mind, because it's always right there in your face, sort of, for you to see. And Theo, you should crack on, mate. You should crack on, because at the end of the day, you do YouTube because, as you say, it's a hobby. It's because you enjoy it. It's because you enjoy it. If somebody else enjoys it, that's a bonus. That's how I see it. If somebody else enjoys what you do, that's a bonus. But the main person to enjoy it is you, man. And that's how it's got to be. That's how, I don't know about Tom, but for me, that's how I started with a podcast, it was because it was something I wanted to do. Didn't think that lots of people would listen to it. Didn't think that I'd get a job out of it. But, you know, if you do put the passion and the love into something, then there's no reason why it can't develop into something more. But it's got to be about what you want to do. And while we say in life that you should always be sort of thoughtful of others and you should always do all of that stuff, that's absolutely right. But sometimes you got to put your own wants as well and your own aspirations at the forefront of what you're doing, because no one else will. Nobody else will look at you and say, I want to help this guy. First you need to help yourself, and then you might get to a point where people say, oh, okay, now I think I like this, let's help him, let's get involved, let's do this. So yeah, man, it's all about doing what you love. And I don't know about you, Tom, but I know about you because I know that you had, like me, a stable career elsewhere that did have more stability, that probably did have more money in it, that probably did have more security, but you chose to do what you love. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But you chose to do what you love. And so to then think that somebody could potentially put you off doing what you love and make...
Oh, have we lost Harry? Oh no, he was on such a run. Oh, it's a pretty picture that he's frozen with. Oh, there we go. You've come back. You froze quickly. Yeah. Sorry, you froze. We lost you for like 10 seconds. That's it. Go on.
I was just going to say, to think that you've given up a stable career and a stable job to do what you love, and then somebody could try and put you off that, or somebody would want to try and put you off that by abusing you. That for me is where I draw the line. It's like, you're not stopping me. You're not stopping me doing what I want to do. I don't give a shit. You know, what you think about my opinions, because it's always the bad ones and the critical ones and the negative ones that are the loudest. And you got to remember that it's not the majority. It's a loud minority.
It is. I was kind of weirdly hoping that a comment like this might come up on the show from SH, who says, this was intended to be an Arsenal podcast-ish thing, right? This is pretty naff. I guess this one is not for me. The hard life of a YouTube streamer seems pretty lightweight. Obviously, coming from the perspective, you know, someone who's not in this sphere, and I am assuming, I'm making some assumptions there, of course, so apologies if I am off the mark. But, you know, being in this situation is without a doubt, and I don't think I'm stepping too far away from the mark by saying this for you, Harry, but is a dream job scenario. Working about Arsenal, you know, is something that both of us have intended to try and strive for several years, and getting to a place where you do wake up in the morning and you know that the first thing you're going to do until you finish your shift or finish your work or finish until you're talking about work is all going to be about Arsenal. It's a privileged position to be in, and I never ever shy away from that fact, because you know it is. But if you're in a place of what I would consider privilege, and I do, being able to talk about Arsenal every single day, it doesn't mean that you don't then discuss the issues with that, and you don't discuss the negatives around it, because a dream job is still not going to be perfect, and there are still going to be drawbacks that are worth talking about. So that when, as you said, there are people that say take inspiration from content either we create or other people create, and they want to get into it and they want to, you know, make Arsenal their job as well, that they're not put off by what they see in chat box, because we've discussed it. And we are discussing, and I think Theo in the chat box, responding to what you said a second ago, saying I appreciate the advice about cracking on and carrying on, and to, you know, just deal in the best way you can with these things that you get. But what do you make of it? Do you get people saying that you're in a privileged position, that you are, and you're living your dream? How can you complain about anything that's going on?
Yeah, you do get people that say that, but we have not at any point said that this is the hardest thing in life. Like, there's much harder jobs, there's much bigger challenges in life. We've all had them in our lives. We're normal people as well. Like, I've lost people. We've all been there. We've all been through life's real hardships, and nobody's comparing a couple of messages on Twitter to those hardships. So I think to say that, oh, you know, the YouTube life is hard, whatever, and sort of say it in a kind of sarcastic-y way is really wide of the mark, because that's not what we're saying. We're just saying that we shouldn't have to put up with people coming at us and not just disagreeing with football opinions, but getting personal. I could show you messages that I've received about my kids who have never ever been on YouTube and who know nothing about football and who can, you know, one's 3 and one's 6 months.
Yeah.
If you read those messages and they were about your kids, you would fume. You would be livid. You would not be able to ignore it. And I'm telling you, you would not be able to ignore it. I had one person come up to me at an Arsenal away game a couple of years ago and say something about my wife because they'd seen a picture of her on Twitter. And I cannot tell you how hard I had to think to stop myself from literally going for the guy. Why is that acceptable? Like, that's there's much worse things like than verbal abuse, but it's something that we shouldn't have to deal with. Nobody should have to deal with it. We're not saying that this is an issue that only we have a right to sort of escape. No, nobody deserves it. Not a single person on the planet deserves to have someone who don't know them, doesn't know anything about them, and clearly has nothing better to do than have a go at them for no apparent reason.
And it goes for footballers as well. Like, there was
100%.
the AST put up that video with Granit Xhaka. I think it was Akil, wasn't it, that spoke to Xhaka, and they did a really. And I loved, despite, you know, I've got my criticisms of Granit Xhaka. Don't get me wrong, and they are criticisms, not abuse of Granit Xhaka, because the two are different. But I thought the way in which he spoke so bluntly and brashly, and how he swore in moments, and, you know, really humanized the conversation, was great, the way he spoke about it. And it kind of, if anything, you know, not coming across as kind of, you know, just the professional facade that a footballer does when they do their media duties, that made things so much better to listen to. So if you guys haven't seen that, and I don't think the video's on YouTube, I think it's on AST's YouTube channel. I don't think it's got many views. I think it's only in the few thousands. So if you haven't already gone and watched it, I really do encourage you to go to the Arsenal Supporters Club YouTube and watch that interview, because it is really insightful, and Granit Xhaka does speak really, really well about it. And it, you know, it's a topic that I know me and Harry care about a lot, and who knows, in the future maybe we can do more to bring up these kind of topics in an even better way. But I also want to say thank you again for all the kind words that are coming through in the chat box. It is mad to see some of the responses we're getting, so thank you so much for that, as always. Amaras says, the abuse definitely also comes from people wanting instant satisfaction from being right. No one's going to be right all the time, and there shouldn't be a problem in changing your opinion either. What do you think about that?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Because it's like, oh, if I said that Mikel Arteta's crap and he proves to be crap, then I'm a better fan than you are. But that's no, people, I think, and I've said this before, and I've copped a lot of heat for it. The definition of what a supporter is has been lost on a lot of people. You can be a supporter and you can be critical, but you still need to support, because that, by the very definition, is what you are supposed to do. And I think that that's been lost on people. And listen, this might upset a few people, but the reality is that over the years, we have glorified certain supporters, I call them supporters, who have clearly overblown opinions, and who have played a part in order to get fame, in order to turn it into a career, in order to turn it into something more. And I'll leave it to you guys to decide which of those people are those ones, the ones that have done that. Some of them have been genuine, yes, along the way, and I've known some of them and know some of them, and that's fine. But there are certainly others who have gone out of their way to blow up opinions, to nitpick, to find things that they believe to be something that they can sort of work on, and then create this divide. And they might think they're not doing any damage and they're just thinking about themselves at the time, and it's fine. But also we as sort of the other people have got a responsibility, because in clicking on those things, in sharing them around, we have, as I say, glorified that type of behavior. And we've made people think that it's okay for someone to get their phone, record a video verbally abusing someone for half an hour, put it up on YouTube, and that's perfectly normal and perfectly fine. So I think as a wider sort of population, we've got a responsibility to kind of not shut them down, because everyone's allowed to have their opinions, but not to glorify what is content that has no thought behind it, no research behind it, no education behind it, and is nothing more than somebody shouting and screaming for effect. But listen, we're a little bit older. Like, I'm in my 30s now. I look at some
Nearly
of my
there. I'm very dangerously
nearly there.
close.
I look at some of my younger cousins or younger or friends who've got younger kids, and some of the stuff that they watch, and I just think, like, what is going on? Like, why have we let people get to this point where they think that this is good? Like, they think that this is educational.
It's drama, though, isn't it? Like,
yeah, it's drama, exactly
and
that.
everyone likes drama. I'll be very honest with you, like, and I talk about this and I use this example all the time, but you know, I and people are going to judge me for this, but you know, one of my favorite programs is Made in Chelsea because I love the drama. I love it. I find it hilarious. It's great, and that's just human nature. But for me, like, there is a difference between, you know, enjoying a little bit of drama and stuff that's going on, you know, reality TV, and drama that's created through abusive, like the generation of abusive back and forths, either between individuals or between one individual and loads of people that are throwing abuse their way. In the case of this conversation, Mikel Arteta, and that in itself creates drama by the things that are being said. You know, that personal attack on either, you know, very recognizable figures, individuals, content creators, whatever, that is the problem. That is that creation for attention. You brought up, you didn't mention the name, and I don't expect you to, and neither has Vishal, but I will address his question. Good to see you guys talk about this. What's your opinion of a certain fan channel who needs to excuse no disrespect and abuse fans when we lose? I'm assuming we're talking about, obviously, the biggest YouTube channel related to Arsenal. I don't want to name them in case that's not who they were talking about. But, I mean, from my perspective, I've done a number of videos on, if this wasn't who you're talking about, great. If it wasn't, sorry. I've done a number of videos on AFTV, and I've talked about AFTV, and I've criticised and I've defended certain aspects. The last video I did on AFTV was about the chanting that was directed at Robbie at, I can't remember the specific game that it was. It might have been Leicester away. And it was a very, very awful chant being directed in Robbie's direction. Yeah. And I remember discussing it, and I remember getting abuse for defending the channel, despite having my own critiques of it, you know. And, you know, I'm aware that Robbie has seen that video that I made. I'm aware that other people at AFTV who I'm friends with, the likes of James. James is a good lad, really has come on the channel a few times, really grounded guy. I'm chatting with Turkish tomorrow as well on the channel, who, you know, despite me disagreeing with a lot of his viewpoints on Arsenal, you know, again, I've only had really positive conversations with him. And that response just to defend that channel, you know, has got a reaction and has got me abuse for doing that. Do you think that there's a way back, in a sense? Because I think a lot of effort's been made on that channel's part in, you know, recent times to try and change the way in which the content is approached. Or do you think the damage is done in a way, in some ways?
It's hard, because once you get a reputation for something, it's really difficult to shake that. And I think they're going to have an issue trying to shake the perception that a lot of people have of that channel. I, like you, know personally a lot of the contributors and think they're good people and haven't got an issue with them at all. And as I said already, there are some people that do play a part. There are some people who are genuinely that pissed off after a game sometimes.
Oh, try sitting for a game with Lee Judges. I'll tell you, it is an experience.
and that has been something that AFTV have profited on. But you can't profit on something and then complain about it, if that makes sense. Like, it's worked for them. Whether lots of those viewers are Arsenal fans or whether lots of them come from other clubs because they want to have a bit of a laugh at Arsenal fans losing it, I don't know. They do put some really good content out. The show that Graham does with James, as you mentioned, the tactical show, that's brilliant. Yeah. I watch that every week because I really respect Graham's opinions, and James puts that together really, really well. Going back to what you were saying about that chant towards Robbie, I was at a home game. I think it was Man City. I think it
Yeah.
was Man City at home, New Year's Day, and Robbie actually sits 4 or 5 rows in front of me. And after the game, when the stadium had cleared out, I stayed back to do a little video for my channel, and there was a couple of guys singing that chant that you're talking about to Robbie, who were in the row behind me, and I turned around and said, "Lads, stop it! Like, there's no need for it." And it got a little bit heated, and I ended up telling them to sort of go away, and a couple of stewards come over.
You said go away? Is that what you said?
Not in so many words,
yeah,
but I said it to their faces, so it was fine. But no, look, and Robbie came over and was like, "No, I appreciate it, thank you," because whatever I think about AFTV and whatever I think about the model behind it, it's not, that's an issue that you might have with a brand, not with Robbie. And I don't think that anybody deserves to go to a football match with his kid. I think it was his kid that he was with, and have to listen to people making chants about him being something that is, we all know what it is not on, and that really resonated with me, because when I had my issue that I spoke about on Twitter, where a couple of tweets were dug up from many years ago, somebody said to me, or somebody made up a couple of tweets as well. They took my how they do it. They take your little image and the handle,
and then type a tweet themselves an account that doesn't matter, and then
exactly. To the point where I was so upset about this, and I had such a hard time sort of making sure that people knew that wasn't me. That I did. The rest of it I owned up to. I put a couple of tweets out that I shouldn't have put. I completely own up to that. But to have somebody accuse you of being something that you're definitely not, and that you despise, and that you think is completely out of order, which is what happened to me as well, it makes you then, once that's happened to you, you don't want to see it happen to others either, because you now understand how it makes them feel. And I got involved in that because, not because I love AFTV, because I don't. I like some of the people in it. I like some of the content. I don't agree with all of it. My view personally is that it needed to progress a bit more in the level of sort of analysis, because of the size of it. I think that there were ways of doing that and making it a bit more like a Redmen TV, or I don't know if you've seen them, the Anfield Wrap, the 2 Liverpool ones, which I think are in that perfect sweet spot between fan TV and actual media. I think they're in the perfect sweet spot. And I think the fact that they have relationships with the club and get interviews, exclusives with the club, and the AFTV don't, shows that there is that somewhere along the line it didn't go in the direction that I would have taken it. It's up to Robbie what he does, and it's obviously worked for him. But yeah, I just think you got to just be mindful of what you're saying to people, because to you it might be a bit of a laugh and a joke to call someone XYZ, but you can make someone snap. And the other thing is as well, it always seems to be the people that give it out that when you give it back go, "Oh my God, I can't believe so and so just called me this." Like, they're always the precious ones, and I never understand that. Like, you go to a game and
it's
you
like when you
abuse
said when we were doing the Lee Judges show, and it was towards the end of the show, and it got to a point where you said, they're idiots, that these idiots that are abusing me. I think Dan made a joke about how the chat box had been lit, and you were like, "With idiots." And and that's, we're not, again, it's a case of, we're not perfect. And I remember I was on the lounge, and I was so fed up of people saying that, I'm Arteta in, I'm a loyalist, or, the lawyer comment that, I know that you get a lot.
So boring.
And I was like, look, these people are like, I said, the morons that stereotype me into this bracket. And, I came off that show regretting using the word moron in that sense, because I felt like, I'd betrayed my own kind of rhetoric about, the way in which we're so anti-abuse. And I'm not saying that calling someone who's, abusing me or, misrepresenting me isn't doing moronic things. And moron's a pretty low level word, as is idiot, like a pretty low level. But it's that sense of also, like, you don't want to give that ammunition and energy, and you don't want to put yourself out there as kind of in any way a hypocrite, which is never going to happen because we're not perfect. So it's just, but go on, sorry, continue what you were saying.
No, that was it basically. Like, it's always, I always find that whenever you do bite back, the people that seem to be most offended by the bite back are the ones who had no regard for what they were saying and had no line in terms of which they were kind of steering clear of. We're just happy to go at it, but then the minute they get it back, it's like, you know, when that whole Granit Xhaka incident, without going into it again because we've discussed it to death, but there were so many people that I knew, like friends of mine, who were standing there booing him and calling him every name under the sun as he walked off the pitch. And when he went like that, they were going, "Oh my God, hold on a minute. You can't sit there and abuse someone and think that they're just going to put their head down and walk past you, because that is not human nature. If you don't care about something and you're apathetic towards something, you can put your head down and walk past it and ignore it. But that would take away the passion. That would take away sort of the motive. Like, it's all relative. Like, as I said to you earlier on, if I don't care about something, I care about my career, I care about my family. So if you're going to come at those two things, I will fight back, because that's the way I am. I can't change that. I've had to learn to do it less, because sometimes the benefits from it are non-existent, and sort of the consequences can be damaging. So you learn as you go along, but it's really difficult to ignore all of the time.
Absolutely. Just to round things off, because I'm conscious of the time, it's probably the best question that we could have had to finish things off from Tariq, who, by the way, has his own channel and works really hard at it, so make sure you go and check it out if you haven't already. Says, what role can we as listeners, non-abusive ones, of course, play, and how do we condemn these abusers, because clearly the social media platforms can't handle or don't take much notice?
Well, first of all, on the social media platforms, what really irritates me is that the minute you put something, for example, on Instagram with the word COVID in it, it flags up.
You just demonetized me, by the way. Just I'm joking. No.
It literally flags up, and it's like there's a banner there, isn't there, that says "Be aware of harmful misinformation," whatever. So you can obviously find it, like just like that. So why don't you do anything to stop it? Is really irritating. In terms of what role can listeners, good listeners, non-abusive ones, play, I don't really expect you to get involved. Like, I don't see it as, like, if you call it out, great. And if you highlight it to me, if I don't see it, then I will always block it, and I will always make sure I deal with it. But I don't want to create this war where, like, the non-abusers versus the abusers, and then you get sucked into it, and then you get subject to it, because it's not really fair. You don't solve a problem by pushing it onto more people. You know, I choose to do YouTube, I choose to have a podcast, I choose to put my opinions in the public domain. I'll take the brunt of it. So I don't expect anyone to kind of to leap to my defense, if that's what you're asking. But I guess we just have to highlight it, make sure that we don't just make it out as if it's normal and just gloss over it, because it isn't normal. It shouldn't be normal. And if we normalize it, then I don't know how we're ever going to get rid of it.
No, I mean, the only thing I can ever say to this is, if you see abuse, you report it. You know, despite Twitter and Instagram being pretty bad with the way in which they do manage it, you know, some accounts can get suspended, do get banned, do get blocked. It's not like everyone gets away with it. You know, they do ban accounts rightly for people that do abuse and say abusive things. So continue to report anything that you see or you hear anything said on shows or whatever that is abusive. You know, if you see it, do something about it. If you hear it, do something about it. That's all we can ever say. You don't necessarily have to put yourself out there on the parapet and, you know, put yourself into a chat box or reply to a tweet saying this is wrong. That's not what we're asking you to do. You know, you can do it, you know, what's the word, delicately and, you know, behind a veil if you want to, much like the abusers do. So there's an ironic justice there, if you like. And there was one more thing from Andy, who says, I wanted to just address it. The club also have to own it, because they are keeping Xhaka, a guy who is not fit to wear an Arsenal shirt for too long, like Harry Maguire at Man United. And this is the type of comment that bugs me, because look, we can criticise Granit Xhaka, we can criticise the Kroenkes, which is also Andy's followed up with as well, but it doesn't justify these players being abused, or anyone being abused. Being kept at the club, and therefore a player being abused, is not the club's fault that player gets abused. The only people at fault is those that are doing the abusing.
Yeah,
that is
exactly.
It's as
And,
simple as that.
and the other thing is a lack of respect for people's professions. That's another thing that really irritates me. You could do a whole nother podcast on that. There's a pandemic. Let's ignore everything that the medical people say and listen to the people writing essays on Facebook. Let's ignore the knowledge of a football manager who's worked through in the game throughout his career and is now sort of a manager. Let's ignore him and let's completely dismiss his qualifications for that role because we think we know better. Like, you can have an opinion, but you should respect people's professions. And saying stuff like Granit Xhaka's not fit to wear the shirt or whatever. Well, Arsene Wenger thought he was. Unai Emery thought he was. How many titles have Arsene Wenger and Unai Emery won between them? Much more than you or I or anybody in this chat box will ever win. So it's not that you have to agree with everything they do or say, but there still needs to be a level of respect when discussing it. And I don't understand why people can't be respectful of one's profession and their qualifications, because otherwise we might as well let podcasters like us in the operating theatre doing surgeries, if that's, we don't have a clue. So let's back off a little bit, basically.
Absolutely. Round off the show with this comment from King. Great show, Tom and Hammy. I'm very proud of both of you. Keep up the good work. From someone being a victim of racism in the past, we need more topics like this. Tim saying, great show. When times get tough, just remember the quiet lovers outnumber the loud haters. Thank you guys in the chat box for your kind comments and words. Harry, thank you so much for joining me for what has gone on longer than I thought it actually would, but I think it's been a really strong discussion, and appreciate you guys, you coming on the show as always to have a chat. Tell people they can find you.
Yeah, you can catch me on the Chronicles of a Gooner YouTube channel and podcast. You can find me on Twitter at Harry Symeou as well, and over at 90min.com. I just saw this.
Is that
comment.
Doom and Gooner?
Yeah, I just saw that. It made me laugh. Whoa, Harry! I just got Southend into the Vanarama playoff final. Good on you, mate. Best of luck.
I love that. I love that your fans are keeping viewers. It makes it sound famous, doesn't it? They're keeping you updated with their football manager. That's great. I love it. Fantastic stuff. Make sure you subscribe to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. You can find a link to the channel in the description. You'll find the next episode of the Canton and Symeou show over there. So if you want to see it, you've got to be subscribed and with those notifications turned on as well. If you've enjoyed this show, please do drop a like on it. And really, and most importantly, please do leave your comments down below. I read through all of them, sometimes begrudgingly, thankfully not too often, because there's always a lot of really, really positive ones. So do leave your thoughts and feelings. I'd love to do a follow-up Twitter space at some point about this topic as well. I've been neglecting the Twitter spaces recently, so I need to get back on that to discuss it even more with you guys who do tune in and listen. We will see you again very, very soon, and tomorrow morning, of course, for the next 8 a.m. show. Harry, thanks again. Really appreciate your time, and as always, up the Arsenal.